You're finally here. You finally arrived. You've at last found the one place which holds the answers to the questions of the ages. You're excited. Your heart palpitates. Is it real? Can it be true? You're understandably hesitant, yet determinedly hopeful. That is good. Your faith in such matters will be rewarded. You'll not find pat and cliched answers here, no! Here's a place of clarity, of definition, of explanation, of truth. Here combines science and religion, removes tradition and replaces it with fact. Here the universe is holographic, yet tangible, ethereal, yet substantive. Here is a place where time is understood as atemporal. Here there is harmony amidst chaos. Here is where the darkened glass is finally cleared. Here's where you'll find the answers to all the unanswered questions which stretch across the cosmos.
And you are across the cosmos for the next hour. My name is Chase Rockwell, and I am your host. I am once again joined in studio with my co-hosts, Lou Rogers and Mark Wilson. Last week we began a discussion on the subject of hell, which, obviously, is far too expansive a subject to be addressed adequately in one show. So we've made it a two-parter. We'll now pick up in our discussion where we left off last week, answering those most nagging of life's questions, and whether a giant nail and glass-embedded stick is an appropriate approach for an omniscient God to deal with his creation. On with the show.
Yeah, it's not about hell or heaven. I wish people would take that and move it aside for a minute and dwell on that later. It's about relationship. And who Jesus was when he came into this world. He did everything for us. There's no question.
No,
he did everything for us. And he opened up a door by which relationship with the Most High, who you would call God, he told us to call him Father. He opened up the ability for us to have a relationship. And it's not as stair-step as people might think. They want to crawl and scrape on their bellies. But if you have children out there, is there anybody out there in the audience who doesn't, with joy, welcome their little child when they're in their jammies and they run up and jump on their lap?
Tons.
Well, I guess there is, but that's sad. But you know the feeling when you have children and you love them. You know,
if you're in a healthy relationship, yes, you're talking about this familial bonding.
Yeah. You're not sociopathic.
Yeah, I remember my little kids. I didn't make them walk into my room backwards with their head bowed and grovel on the ground all the way up to me. They knew. It's funny. I'm a big man, and I could obliterate them at any time. But they knew they could run up and jump on me, and I'd hug them.
Okay, but understand this. All right, that is you. Mm-hmm. There's an internet meme that's kind of old, and I'll describe it. And essentially, it's a little boy cowering with his hands over his head, his knees drawn up to his chest in a corner. And the caption below it says, if your son doesn't look like this when you come home from work, you're not doing a good job as a parent.
That's horrible.
And that is what a lot of people believe.
Yeah,
that's certainly what a lot of the people in the greatest generation believed.
That's terrible.
And further back, because life was short, harsh, brutal, and you couldn't afford to be model coddling or what?
The farther we go back in time, the more kids became a commodity than they became anything else.
But in a healthy relationship,
a healthy relationship, I agree. I couldn't imagine doing that to my kids.
And one of the things about our Father in heaven is that he doesn't have to worry about headaches at work. He doesn't have to worry about where the income's coming from.
No, he doesn't.
Exactly.
I do, but
he
doesn't.
If he doesn't have any of these stresses or worries, which he does not, how do you think he is towards us? Where do you think love... People say, where does love come from?
Yeah, well, anyway.
It comes from who you would call God. You know, what all these tangible, romantic thoughts we have about loving your wife or loving your children, about doing what's good, doing what's honorable and right, all of these come from him. It all comes from him.
But getting back to the whole concept of hell again, you've got this image in your mind because of the way you treated your family, okay? I pointed out that there's not all families that are like that. There's a lot of broken families. There's a lot of families that exist in a constant state of conflict where that is not the case, and they can easily understand
Well,
writing off one of their kids because they've been disappointed. Could you get me that Strong's up there?
to the people out there who do not have a relationship with our Father in heaven, and they're wondering about how to go to heaven as opposed to going to hell, it's really quite simple. Follow the light. On a very simple level, it's follow the light. One way is darkness, the other way is light.
Explosion in the studio.
And it's that simple.
My whole point in this was that how do I want to phrase this? I was getting to the eternal factor of this because right now we are addressing a situation whereupon we've got the creation like a birthed child.
Right.
He wasn't there in our life beforehand. They are there after a certain period of time. We're raising them, and they're either going to go good or bad. And in modern theology, God is taught that He will accept you into heaven if you do the good things that He wants you to do, and He's going to kick you into hell if you don't.
Well,
and when we equate that with how we as people deal with our kids, my whole point was that there are a lot of parents that can identify with that, have no problem with that, and see it as just. So
You're looking at
if we're going to throw that model out, and I think it should be, because I don't believe that's the way it is, then where do we get our justification in not believing that? And that's why I was focusing on this word eternal, even in the one that was used in John 3:16, which I looked up the Strong's. I wanted to double check it, but the Strong's definition of the usage of the word eternal in John 3:16 was life operates simultaneously outside of time and inside of time and beyond time. Now that's the Strong's definition. Eternal is just that. It is not a point that goes off into infinity. So we were created here, and then we start off there. Just go. It is. And I know this is provocative, but we pre-exist our temporal selves.
Here's where hell comes in such a powerful way.
So how can we be eternally in hell unless we were eternally in hell?
It's like this. You ever remember the Kodak cameras called when you take a picture and it comes out the front? It was called a
Polaroid.
Polaroid.
Well, that wasn't Kodak. That was Polaroid.
Yeah, Polaroid almost killed Kodak.
Anyway, okay, we kind of look at humanity as Polaroid snapshots.
We do.
And when a good one comes out, we save it. This is God. And when a bad one comes out, we throw it in the fire. We throw it in the garbage and destroy it because we collect the good ones only.
Like when we're playing a card game and we start winning, we yell, praise God. But when you start losing, you get really quiet.
Well, no, think about the Polaroid aspect of life, that humans are all of a sudden spontaneously born through sex between male and female. A human pops into, we call existence, pops into our world. And so we say to ourselves, okay, now if that human's good enough, if they do everything right, follow a strict line, then God will save that human. If not, He'll take that human, like the Polaroid piece of picture, and throw it in the fire. All right? So that's our concept.
It very much
we
is.
assume that we're a temporal being, and we assume we pop into existence when we pop out of our mommy.
Right.
That's what we've been taught. So the idea of what we are and why are we called children of God, we assume it's the grafting in process. It's like He'll accept you because of the blood of Christ. No, it's before Jesus even died and rose again where we call children of God. So got to ixnay that. So what I think another podcast should be about, and I think we got to get into this, is that we have to be eternal. If not, God's got to bequeath eternal life to us, whether good or bad.
That's nonsensical.
But one for eternal damnation and the other one for eternal life.
Then Then you get back to a situation of this entire corporeal existence, this temporal bubble that we're in, is nonsensical. It is a contrivance.
Right.
Exactly. If physics holds true, we can't start temporal and turn into eternal. You have to be eternal from the start. It's what's eternal is eternal, and what is temporal is temporal.
It's kind of like where people have one of the biggest stumbling blocks is when Jesus is talking about the valley of Gehenna, and the word is translated nowadays in your Bible as Gehenna, and so he says he talks about how don't fear him who can kill the body only, but fear him who can kill the body and soul in the flames of Gehenna. So we go, whoa, that's got to be God only. Only God can kill the soul.
Actually, my Bible says hell, but
So it's a slam dunk, and we say, see, there's a hell, because he talks about fearing God. That's not what he's talking about. It's all about the physical bodily construct. What is the soul? It is which animates the body. You kill the soul, the body dies.
The body has no use.
The spirit, however, is eternal, and people don't get that. Today, we still have people say the soul and the spirit are the same thing. Because why? Because the King James Bible, in the beginning, lumped those two together, like lumped all the eternal habitats as one word hell. For expediency's sake,
going with what was easy and what worked.
Soul, your eternal soul, your soul and your spirit are the same. No, that's really garbage. The soul is what animates the body, animates the flesh. That is it. You kill the soul, the body can no longer animate, whether crippled or not. You are dead to this corporeal world, but you're fully alive spiritually. You can't be killed, regardless of what anyone else says. Sorry about that.
But your disposition could be changed under current theology.
Well,
I don't believe that it can be. I believe that, and I know I'm getting into some touchy territory here, but
okay. Let's clarify or quantify a few things. There is a hell. It was created.
I think we're living it.
It wasn't created for us. From what I can read, we have one that's referred to as the outer darkness, which I think is very well covered by most of us, the three of us. But to our listeners, the outer darkness was exactly that. That was a place where you went if you didn't abide in Sheol. And there was only one group of class of people that we know of that went there. But that's for another show down the road. But the point is those and some of the creatures often referred to being put into the pit, and the pit being put into the lake of fire, and they get all this confused. There is a place of torment.
So what is the pit?
The place of torment, of punishment, are for some very special creatures that God created that purposely disobeyed him.
All right, but are these beings not also eternal?
Yes, they are.
So their eternal disposition, therefore, cannot change. Otherwise, it wouldn't be eternal.
In Genesis chapter 6, it talks about there was a fall and these angels were consigned later. We learn through Peter.
I'm vaguely familiar with it.
To a place called Tartarus. Well, Tartarus is another Greek word.
What about Enoch?
And Enoch. And anyway, it's the same thing. It just simply means an abode under the ground. Okay, so actually, Tartarus was in Hades. If you want to mince words, so it was a specific place in Hades, which just simply meant below the ground. And it's said in chains, which means more than likely they're confined. Let's just use the word confined, because chains is a bad word. So you've got these angels that are confined in Tartarus, which is in Hades, which is called Sheol. And then you got the people that die on the earth that go down to Sheol. Enter Jesus the Christ, who comes. And now we're speaking Greek.
Right.
And he goes down to Hades, or Sheol, and everyone says hell. And he sets the captives free. He transfers what you'd call Sheol to a place called the third heaven, according to Paul and according to Enoch, to a place called paradise, where we go when we die. And it's not heaven, quote, proper, but it's a place we go where our spirits reside after death in this world.
Well, and you get this where?
See, I'm a firm believer in this.
It's in 2 Peter, and also if you go to the book of Enoch, which most people don't even know exists, it's in there too, very firmly.
And you can find it on Google search. It is out there.
We can talk. I think what would be a good podcast would be to bring up the book of Enoch and the reasons it wasn't included in the canon,
Eventually.
and
we're going to have to.
what happened, and how if for those that are listening, if you understand anything about the Dead Sea Scrolls, they found numerous texts from the book of Enoch in that find.
Well, not only the Dead Sea Scrolls, but the other caches that we have found through clay jars. We have more copies and bits and pieces of the Book of Enoch
Than anything else,
Than
almost.
anything else we have.
Yeah.
And we have Jude directly quoting in the very start of his letter.
He quotes Enoch.
He quotes Enoch. We have Christ quoting Enoch in his Sermon on the Mount.
I'd like to read something from Enoch respecting this, if you don't mind.
Enoch is not like e-commerce. It's not about electronic knocking. It's actually a book called Enoch.
Yes.
Who
his
was
name.
and who was Enoch?
Enoch was the seventh from Adam, if memory serves.
And he was the first person that was
taken by the God
The
of this
only.
earth
to heaven
to supposedly
and didn't
heaven.
see death.
Did not see death. Translated immediately.
Yep.
However, I have my doubts.
Anyway, go ahead, read your passage.
Anyway, this is Enoch chapter 22.
As if I'm going to remember that.
Well, if
That
anybody
is
wants to look
2-2
it
for
up.
those of you in Rio Linda.
This is, I'll just brief this through, but essentially, we're comparing this part of Enoch to visions you will see in Luke chapter 16 and 1 Peter chapter 3, both of which deal with the pit, and that the Luke allusion is to the rich man and the beggar. You know,
Lazarus?
Lazarus and the rich man, yeah.
Rich man,
The chasm separating two. So let me just start with this, and because I'd like to get your opinions on it. This is Enoch is an old book. It goes way back.
It's very old school.
So there's no Jesus Christ here. There's no New Testament here. All right, so starting with chapter 22. From thence I proceeded to another spot, where I saw in the west a great and lofty mountain, a strong rock, and 4 delightful places. Internally it was a deep, capacious, and very smooth as if it had been rolled over. It was both deep and dark to behold. Then Raphael, one of the holy angels who were with me, answered and said, These are the delightful places where the spirits, the souls of the dead, will be collected. For them they were formed, and here will be collected all the souls of the sons of men. These places in which they dwell shall they occupy until the day of judgment, and until their appointed time. And I'd like to stop there for one reason and one reason only.
It should have been spirits of men. It's
Because
bad translation.
These places in which they dwell shall they occupy until the day of judgment. Now, with the coming of the Christ and the evacuation of Sheol, this is clearly not correct.
Why?
But Raphael did not know that.
What judgment?
Are you respecting the judgment? Okay, let's get some things straight. Then you're saying that the judgment took place at the point of time that Christ evacuated Sheol.
From Raphael's perspective, he wasn't entirely sure. He only spoke
Exactly.
when he knew.
That's
yeah.
my whole point. They didn't know.
And he also
They
wasn't
know
one
about
of the
the coming
teenage
Christ.
mutant ninja
Well,
turtles.
Paul brings that out later. He's if they knew.
But this is important.
They would not have crucified
because
him.
we always think that these angels know things that they didn't know. Well, this book was verified to have been written at least 230 years before Christ even was born. We know that through the Qumran cave excavations.
Right.
That this copy existed 200 some odd years before Christ.
There's a
These
lot
guys did not know.
Our audience is dealing with a lot of misnomers and a lot of misunderstandings and a whole bunch of this.
So
what
the
we're
angels
talking
didn't
about.
know what was going to happen. They just figured we went to Sheol and there we stayed until God did whatever he was going to do.
That's all they were told. Correct.
Picking up back up in verse 5. Their appointed period will be long, even until the great judgment. There we go, we did the great judgment. And I saw the spirits of the sons of men who were dead, and their voices reached to heaven while they were accusing. Then I inquired of Raphael the angel, who was with me, and said, Whose spirit is that? The voice which reaches to heaven and accuses. He answered, saying, This is the spirit of Abel, who was slain by Cain his brother, and who will accuse that brother, until his seed is destroyed from the face of the earth. Until his seed perishes from the seed of the human race. At that time, therefore, I inquired respecting him and respecting the general judgment, saying, why is one separated from the other? So Abel is clearly on one side of the chasm, Cain is on the other. And he answered, three separations have been made between the spirits of the dead, and thus the spirits of the righteous been separated, namely by a chasm, and that's same word used in Luke 16:26, by water and by light above it. Now that I thought was interesting. And in the same way, likewise, are sinners separated when they die, and they are buried in the earth, judgment not overtaking them in their lifetime. Here their souls are separated. Moreover, abundant is their suffering until the time of the great judgment. The castigation and the torment of those who eternally excreate those souls are punished and bound there forever. And thus it has been from the beginning of the world, and thus there existed a separation between the souls of those who utter complaints and of those who watch for their destruction to the slaughter of the day of the sinners. A receptacle of this sort has been formed for the souls of the unrighteous men and of sinners. So, I read this only because the references to Luke and 2 Peter are clearly there, up into including the actual word of a chasm, which you can see in that parable that Christ spoke about. So Christ clearly either understood that this is what was going on, or he read Enoch. Those are the only two.
I would say he read Enoch. I take point with calling that particular Christ talking about the poor man Lazarus being comforted in Abraham's bosom and the rich man being tormented as a parable. I believe it's an exact story because it's the only parable that names were ever assigned.
Yeah, but here's the deal. If Christ was telling it from a human perspective, how did he know what was going on down there? When's the last time you went to Sheol and came back and spun tales?
This is true.
There's got to be some continuity, and I like continuity. So while I can get that he can understand what's going on and see things from a particular perspective, having experienced the kenosis, this emptying of his divinity into his fleshly body, there are some imposed limitations. I don't think.
But some of those limitations go away upon his baptism and the descendant of the Holy Spirit upon him.
But then that's the same with each one of us. Does he have more of the Holy Spirit than we do? Is the Holy Spirit not the Comforter? Did Christ not say, greater things than these will you do?
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
Well, then I go back to my earlier statement from this recording. What the hell?
I agree. What the hell? There are times we are missing things. When you look at some of the things Peter pulled that did, some of the things Paul did in his lifetime, the miracles that were wrought at their hands, and we don't see them today. I'm sorry, I'm not one to believe that miracles died and went away with the last apostle.
Why does Enoch paint a picture of hell that I can find in Homer's Iliad, that I can find in other ancient Greek writings up into the middle of the Dark Ages?
This was around before Homer. Enoch was there.
There's a consistency of thought.
There is. Up until you get into Asian continent, but in the Roman...
Yeah, I don't even want to...
Once we start
way over time on that, I don't want to delve into that.
Once we start going outside of that, the thought consistency changes.
So what are your thoughts on that?
I think we need to explore the Book of Enoch in a different podcast because there's a lot to be said about it. And, you just opened up one little facet of like a room full of facets.
Well, and the reason I did that, though, is just to simply give the listener an understanding that much of what we get as far as our understanding of and our imagery of this quote-unquote hell, it's been around for a long, long time.
Yeah, Enoch was espoused by the early Jewish movement, but then later rejected.
Yeah. by the Catholic Church.
And there's the Catholic
before
Church
then,
rejected it. But I'm talking about why it didn't make
Hasmonean
it.
dynasty nailed him first, and then
Right. Why it was actually quite well written in the first century, because it talks more about Jesus there than Isaiah does. We always look at Isaiah to give proof to Jesus as the Messiah, but Enoch goes into far greater detail. I think we should talk about that in a later podcast. So much so that by the fourth century, when they were creating the New Testament, they believed it was basically written in the second century.
that it was a Gnostic work. Or
Right, they thought it was a Gnostic work because it was so accurate that it had to be written after Christ lived, died, and rose again, and they thought that's what it was a Gnostic work. What they didn't know, and what we found out later, was that no, the copies of Enoch were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is why the Dead Sea Scrolls were hidden for so many decades, because the Catholic Church had said that it was a pseudepigraphal book, that it was, and on top of that, a Gnostic book, and it was written sometime in the second century. Well, now you find them in clay jars in the Qumran caves, and not just
Going back
a
to
few fragments. You find
lots of fragments. The largest fragment that they found that they were able to compare to the Ethiopic texts was found in Cave 11.
But they found which is really eerie. Out of all of the scriptures and all of the scrolls found, Enoch dominated.
Yeah.
It was
Greatly
amazing. There was
dominated. It
more
was-
on the book of Enoch than anything else. And so you look, why would there be multiple copies of the book of Enoch saved back in the year 200 BC?
Because if you wanted the true history, the true
Which
history
is
of God,
really eerie, because the Jews of the first century AD, at the time of Jesus, really didn't talk much about it, but Jesus talked a lot about it.
Jesus did.
Uh-huh.
But the Jews were moving away from this. As I mentioned, the Hasmonean dynasty, which took place right after the Maccabean Wars,
Right.
they started fiddling around with the Old Testament scriptures. And they recompiled a canon.
Judas Maccabeus and the Maccabees was in the Old Covenant, the Old Testament, that Jesus would have read in the synagogues back in his lifetime. By the 4th century, the Maccabees book,
AD.
was chucked, and we took the 39 existing, what we call canonical books, existing Jewish scrolls.
From the Septuagint.
Right, but what we didn't know at that time was that there was actually the Maccabees, and there was Tobit, and there was another
There was
one,
Wisdom.
of Solomon. They were
Clement,
all
1st and 2nd Clement.
well. They were all not Clement, but they were all in the original Old Testament collection of scrolls. But through different ruling classes, Pharisee, Sadducee, whoever ruled, they would adjust that total. So the total went from 44 down to 39.
well, our listeners need to keep in mind that Pharisees and Sadducees had two different views
And the Essenes.
of a whole lot of different issues, including life after death. And when each side became in control and power, they adapted what they could to prove their point. And so it was a constant yo-yo effect back and forth on what was being taught.
Like the Maccabees, and they were champions. People say that if you go from Malachi to Matthew, there was nearly 400 years of silence. And I was taught that too. And when I grew up...
People, you're talking about a very narrow aisle within Protestantism.
Yeah, but see, they teach that in such a way that you believe it, but there wasn't. There was a lot of history and a lot of writings between the year 400 AD to the time Christ
What
arrived.
if you're a Jew? You're celebrating Hanukkah. What, God was silent? Well, what are we doing with this menorah?
But the reason the Maccabees were chucked,
Why are we throwing blood on the
and there's some brilliant writing in there, they were champions of Israel at death threat. A lot of people died, so they could bring back the sacrifice, because the Levites were too afraid
to oppose the rulers at that time, the Ptolemies, I believe.
Yeah, it was all the mess after Alexander died.
And so what happened is you've got this family that says no more, and at the threat of death, it doesn't matter, we're going to institute the sacrifice again. Well, what happened was in the 4th century, looking backwards, they removed those books from the 39, the collection of 39, there was 44. They removed those because they believed that only through the tribe of Levi could you institute sacrifice. So they ruled hundreds of years later that it couldn't have been from God. But at the time, they were shouting and cheering and you name it. So people today don't realize that what we have in front of us is not the whole story. The 39 books in the Old Testament are not the whole story.
They passively acknowledge that there were probably other writings because the Bible alludes to them and in some cases even says them.
Well, the early King James of 1611, 1612, all the way up until the early 1800s, purposely put in all those lost books or semi-rejected books so you could actually read them. They were
not all of them. I mean, you go back into the Genesis account and even into some of the earlier books that talks about books that
they didn't
I don't
know
even
about.
heard of.
But all the books that were eliminated during the 4th century, they put them in there so we can read them.
There was an agenda at base when we started doing this, and that agenda had a certain bend to it, and that is how we canonized when they were canonizing it. They had a specific agenda. It wasn't just, let's get the Word of God into a book form so people can read it. There was a lot more going on than just that.
No, and that leads us back to the whole hell concept because you can't, as the Old Testament God understood, you can't penalize somebody unless you've got a rule book stipulating what rules they've violated.
Exactly.
And that was the purpose of the law, and that was the purpose. I mean,
that is the purpose of the law.
The carrot and the stick with all that is, you violate the law, you go to Sheol.
Right.
Or, today you violate, you displease God, you go to hell.
Right. And here, hell is the baseball. You're a Christian witnessing to somebody with a baseball bat saying, accept Christ or I'm going to bash you in the head.
But that's all of it. I mean,
and that is all it is.
What the effect, and this is what really bothers me about my fellow Christians, and that is, it turns what should be a selfless pursuit, a pursuit of servitude, into a meism religion. We've got to get our little tiny white behind saved first, then maybe we'll help somebody else. But only up to a point. If it's going to infringe on my possible safety, screw you, buddy.
It goes into the bless us for and no more routine.
We have a misunderstanding of what servitude means. God never asked us to serve Him. That's a misconception.
Very much so.
He asked us to serve our brothers and sisters.
Because we're to be the face of God to fellow man.
The one I think if people understood who, I hate using the word, but who our Father, God. I don't like to use the word God, but who our Father is He is the most selfless of all, I hate to use the word entity, but there's no other way to describe Him. Entities known to exist. Everything He does is for us. He's the ultimate servant. And people don't see that. They look at Him as we're supposed to bow down and serve Him. That's not what He's teaching us. He's teaching us to love others and serve others because that's exactly what He's like.
Well,
except that He's reliant upon us being His face to one another, and we're doing the exact same thing to one another as the celestial entities, our gods of the Old Testament covenant, did to us, which is, it is me first and maybe you, but only if you toe the line.
Yeah.
Now, I get that is not the model. I get that that's not what we're supposed to be doing.
Right.
I am beyond vexed that it's being taught in our churches. I am fed up, and that is part of this podcast. The point of this podcast is that I am fed up with the absolute bilge that is being spewed by churches, and they expect you to pay for the
Yes,
privilege.
they do. Well, and it's a hatred.
So shake you down as you walk through the friggin' front door, make you feel guilty, condemn you to hell if you get one little hair out of place spiritually, and then kick your ass out when you don't measure up. Now, I know I'm being harsh,
No, you're not, because it goes
but
beyond
we
that.
all experienced that in these respective churches. Why do we believe as a people in hell? Why do we why do we cleave? Why are we drawn to an eternal punishment? In the same way we are drawn to these flim-flam men playing pre-card Monty every Sunday. I don't get it.
Well, a lot of them don't get it either. Actually, most of them don't get it, and they think that's just the way it's supposed to be.
Really? Okay, but they're the ones
I have yet
playing the three-card Monty.
I'm 58 years old, and I've talked to pastors, teachers, supposed theologians. Forget the books and the tape series and the TV. That's different. But people that I can actually have a tangible conversation with, not one of them got it. They honestly believe that what they were taught is truth. And so they're just simply fulfilling the commission they think that was given to them, and they're going to teach what they thought was truth to others.
So theology, or theologians, the pursuit of theology today has ceased to be an intellectual pursuit. It is just rote memorization.
No, it's for the quest to get letters of the alphabet after your name to give weight to the words you speak when you stand behind the pulpit. That is what modern theology is today.
So the pastor that's breaking his ass trying to start a little church, even if he's doing it in his living room, who sacrificially goes out and helps his neighbor, this or that, I find that hard to believe that they're just trying to pursue, for what, just attention?
Well, now we're defining different things.
No, because a lot of them are believing the exact same thing, but they haven't become corrupt with the power that's behind this.
They're believing it because they've been taught it, just like dispensationalism. The three of us know that didn't even start to be taught until about 150 years ago.
A little bit earlier than that.
Maybe a little bit earlier, but my timeline can be off. But it's a relatively new concept in Christianity. But you can go to almost any church in the city I live in, and they hold to it stronger than they hold to the fact that Christ was crucified and raised again.
For the most part, that is correct, yes.
I would say that you're right. There's some extremely wonderful people that have lived and are living presently that love our Father and love the people and cherish the relationship and consider it an honor to live in poverty
and have laid their lives on the line.
Knowing that they are going to give other people gold in the sense of a relationship with our Father. And they're doing everything they can, but they're not theologians. And our Father always sees the thoughts and the intents of the heart, so they'll be well rewarded and taken care of.
Yeah, but that's the cookie approach. What if you're not doing this because you want a cookie?
Well,
what if you're doing it just because there's certain right things or right ways and there's wrong ways? Why does it always have to be quid pro quo?
It doesn't. I've never considered the idea of reward. I hear that from the pulpit, that you're going to get all these crowns and throw them at Jesus' feet. Then the competition is who throws the most crowns at Jesus' feet, and you play the game. There's never been the impetus behind me learning about my Father. The impetus has always been, I want to learn truth and share truth.
For me, it's I want to learn.
Truth. It's all about truth. I don't care about money. I've never made a dime off anything. I probably never will. It's okay with me. I care about people being freed from certain bondages. I care about people knowing our Father, the real Father. And so that's what's behind me and the motivator. There's other people, millions of other people, that have died in various places for various causes, all with the same thinking in mind. And that's wonderful.
We're all doing our part in a small way.
Yeah, but we're battling against a literal tide of people who are propagating enormous error. I feel like Sisyphus rolling that damn boulder up the hill, only to have it come rolling back down on top of me.
Well,
and it's over and over.
It's
and
okay.
Over and
That's part of
over
the
and
exercise of humanity. It's okay.
No, it's not okay. It's not okay.
When we get to
it
the
gets,
other side,
it gets exhausting.
It's tiring.
It
That's
gets
for sure.
defeating.
but yeah, we're gonna leave these suits of flesh, and then we'll understand. You know, our Father looks down from heaven, and He can correct everything and anything in a moment in time, because He's in control of all celestial objects as well as all substance, all energy. I know that. He allows us to live out our lives in this world. He allows us to fight these battles of faith for reasons yet unknown. So rolling the boulder uphill, generation after generation after generation, there's purpose in it for the person doing the rolling.
Perhaps.
You know, so I don't. You know, He's the great equalizer of all things. Again, He looks to thoughts and intents of everyone's heart, not the accuracy of theology. You know, truth is simple from His perspective downwards. For us, it's like a treasure hunt that takes incredible elbow grease and many years. If it was truth that got us into heaven, we'd all be cooked.
Maybe.
Oh, we all would, because none of us know everything for certain. It's all about faith and the exercise of that faith and the straining towards the truth.
Pursuit of truth, I think, is a noble endeavor. I believe that when that pursuit is overshadowed by personal greed, you found a little niche, you can make some money, you can earn some power, you can manipulate others. The pursuit is gone. Now you're just another barfly.
There are several ways in which we can honor our Father and honor our fellow human. One is we can spend years researching so we can unlock certain secrets and teach them with more accuracy. Another way is we can get a glass of water and give it to the person who's thirsty. Both are the same. Both are giving nutrients in the name of Jesus. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, but if you're filling that water with strychnine before you give it to them,
well, then you're obviously, you're doing what's evil. I'm saying when we have pure intent, if you give somebody clothes, or you give somebody water or food, or you literally get down when you say you pray for a brother or sister, you honestly do pray for them. And that's what's in your heart. There's no difference between that person or the person who studies, quote, his ass off or her ass off in order to find truth. They're both on a pursuit for one thing, which is truth, which is honoring our Father, which is love.
So, now, because we're going to have to conclude this.
Oh, sorry.
No, you don't have to be sorry.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that we're in some sort of a resolution with respect to hell. So, is there a hell?
No. It's a misunderstanding
So,
of word.
I want to bring this around because this is important. So when you have a Hitler, when you have a Pol Pot, when you have a Stalin, when you have a Mao, when you have a David Burke, well, I'm not going to David. Let's say a Gary Ridgway, a Manson. These are people who just abhorrent in behavior, absolute in even like you go back further, a Nero,
Right.
Caligula, any number of the popes, the whole Borgia family.
All sociopaths, psychopaths, all people with mental deficiencies that have the.
Okay, but mental deficiencies. Now you're giving them an excuse. I want to
No,
know.
I'm not giving an excuse, but these are people that a lot of these people have no ability to empathize with anybody else.
So where does that leave them? Where, when all is said and done, when they've closed their eyes on this planet for the last time, and they're going to go and meet their maker, as it were, what's going on?
Well, we can look at it in various ways. We all want satisfaction. That's just innate in the human psyche. We want satisfaction. So we want to know that they've been
We
punished.
want revenge.
sadly, we want revenge too. I just as I trust my
Retributive
Father
justice, yes.
for heaven, as I trust Him for all sustenance, I know He's got that wired. He's got that taken care of. If He's going to include me in it, then I need to have some understanding in order to exercise prudence and wisdom. Paul, in an off-the-cuff way in Corinthians, is ticked off about them and their lawsuits. He says, he gives them some pretty good advice. But then he says, don't you know that we'll be judging angels? Don't you know that you'll judge the world? And he says it in a way that's kind of funny because he's torqued at him. As he's writing this letter, he's getting emotional about it. He goes, don't you guys get it? What are you bringing lawsuits against each other and driving, the name of our Father in heaven into the mud to the Gentile world? And so he brings that in kind of an off-the-cuff manner, which is funny. But according to Paul, and what he learned is that we're going to be judging both angels and humanity. So I pray for the wisdom at that time. I don't know. I look at, we have such limited understanding. We look at the human vehicle as the end all. We see someone kill a person or several people, and it's horrific. It's a crime. It's heinous. There's no question. And in this world, we want to incarcerate the person or give them a lethal injection or whatever. But in eternity, we don't know what's going on. So I'd have to save my thinking for when I have a bigger picture and a better understanding of what's going on. Would I want to see somebody burn in agony for what we would call centuries and millennia?
Centuries.
And millennia and eons? No, I'm sorry, I wouldn't. What I would like to see is the particular individual learning, not repenting because he wants to get away from pain,
But
learning and understanding.
And that's essentially Buddhism.
No, I would think.
So why is it that the Buddhists seem to have a lock on what's actually going on and we do not?
The Buddhist philosophy is pretty interesting. And I would say there's a lot of truth in it that we will automatically reject. And we are taught to call people who don't think like us, we're taught to call them what?
Heretics, non-believers, sinners, lost, blah, blah, blah.
There's
Fill
a
in the blank.
whole host of names that...
Where do I start in the names that I've been called?
Right. So, but I don't think that's how it works. I think there's a lot more going on than we can comprehend. I don't think it's simply our little small window of understanding and theology, and the rest of the world is toast, as you would say. In other words, 1 billion or less are going to be, quote, saved, and 7 billion plus whatever and however many people lived in Earth's history are going to go to hell and burn in torment forever. I reject that thinking, and I know that he has things together. I don't, but he does. I trust him, and I think my trust is well placed. And if he wants to include me in his decisions, he's going to do that in his time. But for right now, all I can say in regards to hell is a screwed up name. It's not accurate. It's trying to force fit 3 different ideas into one word. It's expedient from that standpoint, but what it creates is chaos in the thinking.
Well, when you lack the understanding, it's pretty easy to put them all into one word, because why not?
Yeah.
So a Hitler, a Stalin, a Pol Pot, a Mao, any number of different barbarians, mass murderers,
Genghis Khan?
Whatever, in history, they're fine and dandy.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that they're in the hands of someone with a far greater intellect than I have, and a far greater ability to discern and to know what future is and to know what to do. But to simply say he's just going to take everyone according to our understanding and throw them into an oven of unparalleled existence and turn the heat up and put them into a body that doesn't burn up and put them into torment forever and ever, which is a common term in those days.
Yeah.
Just been a long time. But throughout all eternity, I don't think that's a correct truth. I think that's not correct at all. I don't believe it. It's nowhere else. And so I just trust that he's got it all together.
So what prevents the Christian then from just throwing up their hands and saying, screw it, I really don't need to live a certain way because there's no attendant consequence. I can go and do whatever I want because Jesus is going to save me at the end anyway, and there is no roasty hell, so screw it.
Except you lose in your relationship between you and God.
Under present theology,
I think that
that's gone anyway.
Well,
I would think that'd be a wonderful thing to think about, because if that's what your relationship with our Father's based on, then it's a wrong relationship.
Well, have you not been to a church lately?
Well, if your relationship with our Father is with a relationship with a God that you don't know, and you're only worshiping Him and singing songs about Him and feeding others because you're fearing hell, walk away for a while.
That's part of it. There's no doubt that's part of it. But as I said, it's become a religion of meism. So it's either you are getting your spiritual fix. You know, you're getting the feelings. You know, you want your orgiastic, ecstasy going on thing during worship and what have you, or you're afraid that he's going to pull the trigger on you and blow you away.
Or it's a social club that you're just showing up for.
Or that. In any case, little of it is a matter of servitude towards your fellow man. And that's because it's not taught.
Well, thankfully, we have a lot of years in this world. Thankfully, it's not like we're not like the mayfly, living for a day. We live a number of years and experience a lot of things. And I think that, who you are today is different than you were 10 years ago.
There's no doubt about that.
And I can say that about everybody.
Well, unless they haven't grown. There are some people that do not grow.
That is true. Many people I've known.
But I can tell you, I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago.
Right. So thankfully, he allows us to experience, various situations in conjunction with our theology, with our observations in conjunction with our theology, teaches us a lot. And, people that, I used to be a firm believer in hell because I was ignorant. And that's not a bad word. Ignorance is not a bad place to be.
No.
It just simply means you don't know yet. And you're trusting, and you write down what your pastor says, or you listen to a radio program or a TV show, and you're faithful in following and believing, and you'll even teach it to your friends. But as time goes on and you grow and you learn, you start questioning. And it's not that you're abandoning your faith. You're questioning the tenets they're supposed to be questioned. I mean, that's what it's all about.
You're trying to understand.
Yeah.
It's not about, gee, am I believing right or wrong? Is my faith put in the wrong God or anything along those lines? It's trying to understand what you've been taught.
For instance,
if you're not questioning, you're not learning.
If you follow the standards set up, it's a very limited religion, Christianity, because you have to follow tenets that are taught only to Christians. And in other words, if you take a look at the Tibetan Buddhists, if you take a look at the Hindu, if you take a look at all of the Oriental faiths and the American Indian faiths, you're automatically ruling them all out as toast. Toast meaning you put it in a toaster.
From a Judeo-Christian standpoint,
right, so
that's absolutely true.
My thinking,
they're condemned and burned.
When I was younger, I could understand and accept that because I was just learning the Bible. I was learning and respecting everybody and doing my best to just understand how many books there were in the Bible, let alone what was in each book. But as you grow older and you start rubbing elbows with different people, you start questioning, well, I'm going to get mine, but you turn around, you go, what about them?
Yeah. The entire African continent is gone.
Yeah, what about them? And
all of South America.
How can they go to heaven too?
All of Asia.
And then you say, well, they're worshiping evil and they're worshiping wrong and they're doing this wrong. Okay, well, can they learn what's right? Sure, become a missionary and go in there and try. And a lot of missionaries have been killed doing that. And there's been headway made, and there's been Bibles translated into an amazing amount of different languages, all of which is fantastic work. But in the meanwhile, billions have died. They've left this earth. Where are they? And so my heart breaks for those billions that have died and left this earth that were not positioned as I was to receive this news in the comfort of the United States of America under a free government, and where I could pursue other avenues of life as well.
So this creator, the being that exists outside of everything that's possibly tangible in any dimension, is so asinine that he would say, well, you know, I'm going to save this group of people because I'm going to have them born in the United States.
And that's manifest destiny.
And these people over here in New Guinea, they're lightning bolt targets.
Manifest destiny was a mindset that was thought that came into prominence in the early 19th century, primarily at the cusp of westward expansion, primarily with the purchase of the lands from the French, the Louisiana Purchase.
Well, yeah, we actually have the 1870s ruling against the Native Americans that Native Americans can't own land because they're heathens.
Well, exactly. But see, that's the mindset that and these were Christian people.
Yes, they
believed in God, raised their children to believe in God, followed the Ten Commandments supposedly, and yet they could look into the faces of little Indian children and just slaughter them because they're nothing more than just animals.
That's ignorance.
There's a level of ignorance and there's a level of malevolence. And there is a meeting
most malevolence is ignorance. It's like this. No matter who the person is and how malevolent they supposedly are, when they leave this world and they stand before our Father, everything drops.
I get that, but at that point, the game, if you will, the test is over. Isn't it the better thing to figure that out beforehand?
Well,
and when you go back into the philosophies again, as we were talking about, how is it that even with this hammer of hell over these Christians, that they have they're terrified of it, but they have no problem inflicting that upon their fellow man? You know, whether you're a slave master and you're going out and raping the little girls that are under your care, or little boys, or beating them to death with your sticks or straps or whatever, whips, it doesn't matter. You're taking another human being, and I don't get how you can hold a Christian view and do the exact opposite of what is taught.
It's always been that way. The Reformation showed, the Puritanist movement showed that they were no better than the Catholic, Spanish
they were
Inquisitions that were left.
Horrible.
They were evil to people. They heaped all this judgment on people.
Okay, and don't you understand that
this hasn't stopped?
No,
It's
it hasn't.
still going.
And once the stays of present societal conventions are removed, and they will be,
Yes.
that these same self-appointed men of the cloth will come after us again. I've no doubt about that. And there's many people that I know of who are familiar to all of us would
Yes.
be at the vanguard of that push.
I'm sure I have several people that would be happy to be leading the charge against us.
Yeah.
We have several of them.
I don't mind.
The point is that they're the ones who are disseminated. They're the ones that are listened to by the populace. They're the ones disseminating the message. Hence this podcast, because they're not going to ordain me in any of their faith movements.
Absolutely
They're not
not.
going to give me any degrees because I'm looked upon as part of the enemy. I am looked upon as part of the problem. I've been called a heretic more times. I should just make it my middle name.
Jesus said,
But it is not.
Jesus said these words, I am the light to the world. Right? What are we?
Well, presently we're supposed to be reflectors of that light to the world.
Really?
Sure.
Try it again.
No, that's how I see it.
Why do you use the word reflector of
Because
light?
I'm not God.
Well,
He
because
is.
wait a second. Because that's what the term Lucifer means.
Yes, he was
Lucifer
the
means
light bearer.
Light bearer, and it's a reflector of the light. That's not what we are. We're not Lucifer. We are the light, and people
Some
don't
people.
understand that.
Now we're the salt of the
We're the salt of the earth, but we're also the light to the world in darkness, the truth. And so it doesn't matter who follows who. If you speak the truth, our Father will find a way to get it out there. That's just the way it is. You know, I don't care what I think, and people could laugh on the other side of it. I really don't care what I think.
What you think?
I don't care about what I think being right or wrong in the sense of making me somebody. That's why I don't care to pursue a degree. I don't want to go down that avenue. What I do care for is truth. And I care for our Father. And I care for people. So therefore, the motivation behind everything that I do is not to gain any recognition. It's not to gain money. It's not to gain position. It's simply that others might gain freedom from bondage and have access to whom the Father is and know Him
they have
intimately.
to know that they're imprisoned first.
Well, that's part of what this is all about.
Many of them do not know. So I suppose we need to wrap this
Yeah.
up. Okay, well, that concludes this week's episode, but we will convene next week and pursue even more truths. So until then, for Across the Cosmos, I'm Chase Rockwell, your host, along with
Mark Wilson.
Lou Rogers.
and we will see you again next time.
Send any questions or comments to us via email at info@acrossthecosmos.com. Also, visit us at the web at www.acrossthecosmos.com for show updates, news, and information. No part of this podcast may be used without express written permission from the staff of Across the Cosmos. Across the Cosmos is a production of Omite Corporation, copyright 2015.